Hello and welcome to the Inside Track, the podcast where we chat about all the things that give you the edge in the world of innovation, business design, tech, and culture. I'm Fuzlin Esau, and today I'm joined by two familiar faces, Toby Rogers, Head of Product at Hedgehog Lab, as well as Stephen Boyle, Tech Lead, also here at Hedgehog Lab, as we look at what's been hitting the news this week. So we'll jump straight in, and our first topic is a really interesting one because I think that most people who are in product kind of really have an affinity for Lovable. And their latest ad has really captured a shift towards brands that feel native to the moment. So they're simple, direct, and really built around what people actually want to do rather than what the product wants to say. And as this bar for brand is moving from storytelling to more utility, and we spoke about this a little bit in the previous podcast, if the best brands now feel more like tools than actual campaigns, what does that mean for how you build and differentiate both product and brand?
I think this is super interesting, and I really, really like the way Lovable are pitching themselves in that new ad. I don't necessarily agree with kind of the message that they're saying about starting a business and stuff like that, which I was talking about on LinkedIn the other day. But I think in terms of the ad and their brand positioning, I think it is really, really interesting and really exciting. I think it kind of brings together two things that I'm kind of really interested in and have made kind of quite central to the way I think about product stuff and the way my team does, which is Clay Christensen's Jobs to be Done framework from the Innovator Solution and Simon Sinek's Start with Why. And I think the Lovable ad kind of slams those two things together in a really, really powerful way. So they're addressing the kind of job that they think their users want to get done, which is being able to rapidly turn their ideas into potentially a winning business or a winning startup. And that's quite different to what their competitors are doing. So Bolt and Replit are talking about kind of the power of their models and the features that they've got and how they make it easier for you to do development and stuff like that. So they're very much in the, this is what we do and this is how we do it. But Lovable have kind of flipped that right into, we're a brand about empowering you to do this job, which is building a successful business. And I think when technology is getting us to the point that kind of everybody can do similar things and software becomes about the job that it does, not the feature set that it has and stuff like that. I think Lovable are absolutely winning. I think it reminds me very much of kind of some of the old kind of Apple positioning and Apple advertising about how they were kind of positioning themselves against kind of Microsoft and IBM and Dell and stuff like that, which was very much about the vision of why Apple existed as a brand. And I think Lovable's doing that in a really interesting way.
That ad really does tell a story, and I think Toby's absolutely right. It's like when you compare it against like the likes of Replit and things like that, they're trying to position themselves in the market now where they're not just a vibe coding tool to get a SaaS thing out. They're actually a vibe coding tool to get your business shipped and into some sort of viable way. I think it's incredibly meaningful, and it really does tell a true story. And I think when I watched it, I was getting goosebumps. Their marketing is absolutely insane, so well put together. And I feel like now the best type of marketing now behaves like a really good user experience. It kind of reduces friction rather than adding sort of persuasion. It's not just your typical, I'll upload a demo video of my dashboard web app onto Twitter and see how well it does. This took it in a completely different direction of like, okay, it's not just the software we're showcasing now. We can help you build an actual business today. And I think that's incredibly strong in comparison to what their competitors are doing as well. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think because I used to be a music journalist, I see a lot of things through the lens of popular culture and popular music and can't help it. So I've been talking a lot recently about how the advent of AI coding tools has kind of a similar impact to the advent of the sampler in the 1980s. And suddenly it democratizes access to the power of creation. And Lovable's ad really, really plays to that in a very, very strong way. It's got kind of quite a sort of punk vibe to it, which is like, actually, we're kicking against the mainstream and we're empowering ordinary people who felt disempowered about launching a business beforehand to suddenly be able to do that. And that's a really super powerful message that people like Replit and Bolt aren't getting to. And when you've got that really powerful message and that real powerful brand story, and that's completely aligned with kind of the job to be done that your customers have got, you find absolutely winning with that. I think it's super powerful.
Absolutely agree with both of you. And I think it's also something we're seeing in non-tech brands. I think we're seeing it across the spectrum. Even, brands like Nike and Adidas, they're sort of moving away from the sort of big splashy campaigns and just like, we do the thing. Like, if you want to go fast, use this. And I think that's really changing. Things are becoming a lot more direct because we have so much less time to say what we need to say. Attention spans are decreasing, and a lot of people are just like, what is it that what does it do in like a line? And that's your campaign. There's no frills or anything, and you're not getting big celebrity endorsements because that can go in any direction. But that's really sort of something that we're seeing across all of these different brands, across industries. That sort of, what is it? What is the need you're fulfilling? What is the thing that you're doing? Just tell me that, and I'll decide if it's the product for me. Our next topic is AI related. These things are usually AI related. And as sort of AI is accelerating access to information and output, again, the limiting factor is no longer that knowledge. It's sort of the ability to think clearly, make these decisions, and apply judgment in context. The advantage is really shifting from knowing more to thinking better. And these are what we're hoping to see from newer models, with sort of clarity becoming the new competitive edge. So if AI can generate answers instantly, what becomes, and I think this is especially pertinent for the two of you guys, what becomes the real value of expertise, both when sort of developing or just kind of thinking?
It's an interesting one. What happens to expertise if AI is so good at it, right? And I think you're always going to have the expert there. AI can give you like 10 answers, but actually the expertise is knowing which one actually works in that relevant situation. There's a really popular, hacking conference that's hosted all around the world called DEF CON. And all of these kind of white hat hackers get together, whether in the States, the Middle East, whatever, and they actually bring in physical infrastructure that mimic real like physical servers like Amazon and things like that. And they're all given challenges to effectively hack into these things. And a lot of them this year round are using AI models to kind of bridge that gap and basically tear apart the systems. I've actually found out that giving them access to AI enabled them to do the solutions a lot quicker than if they were to just do the solutions if they weren't an expert. So I think if you were to give the most competent, for example, security researcher access to a model, or white hat hacker access to a really powerful model, then you'd get a lot better results than if you were to just try and hack something that wasn't kind of, you weren't an expert in, for example. So I think the expert's always going to be in the equation. AI is kind of just the enabler for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's the difference between knowledge and wisdom to some extent, in that AI knows everything about everything, basically. All of our models are scraped from our entire internet, which is our entire knowledge as people. But it doesn't know what to do with that knowledge because it doesn't have the lived experience to be able to make a judgment call about something when it hasn't been in that situation before. And we're looking at kind of experience. Experience is about kind of building frameworks for decision making. And AI can't build those frameworks for you. You've got to go through the process of learning and building them yourself and making decisions that go bad and failing and being essentially being in the arena when things are happening. There's a military strategist guy called John Boyd who did some stuff in the 1950s and 60s. He was a fighter pilot in the Korean War, and he ended up coming up with a load of kind of mental models and frameworks for military strategy. And he talks about a thing called fingertip feel that fighter pilots develop, which is the ability to implicitly make decisions in a high risk situation because you've got the experience of having done it before. And AI can't do that for you in any sort of kind of professional situation. You've got to have learned how to do the thing that you're doing. And if you've learned how to do the thing that you're doing, then AI can like massively supercharge that, but it can't replace it. I think it's one of the things that when it comes to like recruiting people into my team, I'm quite interested in looking at breadth of experience and breadth of expertise across all sorts of different domains, because all of those things help you get better at making decisions. And that is where kind of the human advantage still sits when we're talking about what impact AI has around knowledge and decision making and judgment and stuff like that.
That really makes so much sense.
It's unfortunate as well. Like we're seeing something similar where people are saying, oh, well, the computer science degree is dead. And I graduated from Northumbria University here in Newcastle. And I feel like I didn't have access to all these AI models like what all these kids have access to today. But my God, that experience of going through a 4-year stint at university was so valuable. And like, I wish that kind of wasn't overshadowed by the fact that LLMs could just do all of your semester work for you. I still think having that experience of going through university, regardless if you've got access to AI or not, still incredibly valuable thing to have and have experienced as a human being, rather than just letting AI do things for you. So yeah, I hope, just as a bit of a tangent, I hope that the computer science degree still goes strong, and they'll probably just position it a different way as we continue to innovate in the future. So yeah, just my 2 cents on that.
That's super important. That idea of the expertise still needs to be in the room. As much as you can have the knowledge, an AI is still not going to know what good looks like to that particular situation. There's been a lot of talk recently about sort of regulations around platforms and safety and those sort of things. And we've seen it pop up a few times with regards to social media and that kind of thing. And this debate around platform safety has moved from really moderating content to regulating the design itself, questioning the product mechanics. So things like the auto scroll or those sort of things that are just embedded in the product. As responsibility starts to move upstream from what users do to how products are built to influence them, can design choices be seen as a source of harm? And how does that change the way you think about product responsibility from day one?
I think this is really interesting again and plays to some of the stuff that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, Stephen. But, I think there's a whole thing around the whole Spider-Man Uncle Ben piece, which is the whole with great power comes great responsibility. And I think as product designers, developers, product managers, product strategists, whatever, I think when you are crafting products for potentially millions or billions of people, you have to think about the potential impact your decisions make. And as well as kind of optimizing for user experience, you've also got to think about, does that optimizing for experience also kind of optimize for harm? And if it does, how do we make sure we don't do that? I think it's impossible to say that YouTube is not optimized for causing harm, because it is all about driving engagement, driving number of likes, driving number of kind of views, and all of those sort of metrics. And all of those metrics drive you towards kind of dangerous content in the end. So at some point, you're making a decision about making people make those choices about what sort of content they engage with. I think Martin Luther King talked about power as kind of an ability to achieve purpose and affect change. And he was talking about that in a political setting, but that's really quite key in a technological setting as well. Because if you're working for Facebook, if you're working for YouTube, if you're now working for Anthropic or OpenAI, you have the potential to affect change for millions of people. So you need to be thinking about your ethical responsibility around those things.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that this is such a spectrum of danger now that I'm kind of thinking about it. We had the issue where people like companies like are getting sued and things like this. But then we had that recent incident in Wisconsin where those 3 teenagers were killed in a high-speed car crash because they were trying to use the new Snapchat filter. And that was in 2017. It was like a Snapchat speed filter, but they were going 123 miles an hour. That is bloody scary. You would think like, oh, before releasing this filter, should we maybe not do that? Are we now promoting people to go over the speed limit and like, by the way, being on your phone whilst driving at such speed, is that even, that's not even legally a thing. So why is it legally a thing to be shipped as software that just goes immediately to these users' devices? So yeah, I think there's a lot of harm it can do. And I think my frame of mind's changed a little bit since last, I think like on episode 2, where, sometimes, yeah, it can be down to the parents and stuff. Sometimes it's actually just down to the companies themselves. They need to be held responsible in some sort of way. But I feel like a lot of the time, these products are still up, they're still running, these businesses are still there. Where's the actual damages? They're making millions upon billions of pounds in revenue by many different types of monetization strategies. How do you hold a company that's like got a monopoly over all these different things liable? I don't know. Because under any other circumstance, like if it was a human just driving over a speed limit, they would get charged, etc., etc. But it's just the way of the world these days, I feel.
I think the Snapchat thing is super interesting and a really powerful example of what we're talking about. That I agree that there still needs to be some personal responsibility around how you access and kind of take influence from media and from technology and stuff like that. But I think there is a organizational responsibility. If you look at the Snapchat example, someone at some point within Snapchat has made a decision that engagement and shareholder value is more important than customer safety, and that's an explicit decision that someone has made for that filter. And yeah, they got away with it because of whatever the kind of legal implications were around that, but that doesn't get away from the fact someone has made that decision at some point. And as product people and tech people, you need to be aware of that, and you need to think about your responsibility in that role.
I think I've quite a sort of real world example of this, unsurprisingly, is YouTube, which really is sort of geared towards that sort of amplifying harmful, dangerous content. When my dad started getting into YouTube, he was just sort of like watching. It was very much, he's in his 70s. All he does is watch running videos, and without any prompting from him, it started showing him like manosphere content. Suddenly, he was getting Andrew Tate videos coming up in his feed. And we literally had to go, hang on, you need to move away from this, because he was just sort of starting to be like, oh yeah, then there's this guy, Andrew Tate. And without the context of the world, he has sort of he somehow fallen into this thing. And we had to go, wait, hang on, you need to take a step back and we need to get your algorithm back to what it was before, but completely unprompted. And I think that we kind of always think of sort of vulnerable people as kids, but more and more it is sort of that older generation that are falling prey to AI videos and these sort of things, and not being able to kind of tell the difference between what's real and what's not. And that's the stuff that's being amplified. And we see that every day with sort of like nobody knows what's real anymore. And those algorithms are a big part of that, because that's what gets engagement. That's what gets people to sort of, onto the next video. He's no longer into those videos. We've got him out.
I think that's really interesting as well, in terms of like who we think of as vulnerable in this sort of context. Like my son is 9 and watches a lot of YouTube, and he is incredibly savvy already about what is real, what is fake, what's AI generated, and what he believes versus what he doesn't believe, in a way that is much more than kind of my dad when he was still alive watching YouTube videos, who believed everything that he saw because like he always believed the media. And but my son's like, nah, that's not real. That's not real. Nah, I don't believe that. So I think there's the kind of vulnerable younger generation is actually going to grow up in a more savvy place, because they've experienced a lot of this stuff, but they still need guidance and guardrails and protection to make sure that they engage with media and tech in a positive way.
And that's the thing, we do sort of have, you can put on like parental guidance for kids. You can get them into a certain block, but there isn't that for an older generation. Like there needs to be sort of like a parental guidance, so you can kind of keep track of what's going on there.
I don't know if anyone watches Black Mirror here, but there's a Black Mirror episode where, and it links very closely. It's so strange how it's very dystopian. I don't know if anyone watches it here, but it's like this episode where this mother gives this child like an iPad, and this iPad you can kind of see everything through the child's eyes, and at some point in their lives you're meant to sort of deactivate it. It's meant just for child safety, but she keeps it in throughout her entire adult life. She sees a lot of heinous things, and it kind of just reminds me of like what's going on right now. Like, if that's the safety we're going towards, is it going to be like that insane where we've got to keep track of our kids in that capacity? Or does there have to be other systems in place with other third parties that have to go about doing it as well? But it just really reminded me of that episode of Black Mirror, how we're going to really get to a world where there's going to be bubble wrap all around a lot of these products, basically.
Really good episode. Archangel is what it's called, if anyone wants to watch it.
Oh, okay, we've got a man in the room. Yeah, that's good.
It's the only thing that sticks in my brain these days. Awesome. So now this was something, Steve, you were really keen to chat about, and that's the release of Claude Mythos and Project Glasswing. And I think the term you used was big priority. So what are we expecting to see from Anthropic here with these sort of frontier AI models?
Yeah, so for those that don't know,
is probably the better question.
For those that don't know, Mythos is going to be effectively the new model that Anthropic has created. Their latest model is Opus, and they've actually decided collectively to not make this model generally available like other models. They've decided to keep the model very close to their chest. The leap between how good this model is in comparison to the other models was kind of how Sonnet is to Opus. Sonnet was their model before Opus, and then now Mythos is the model before Opus, effectively. And basically, all these CVs that we've been finding in software, like common vulnerability exploits, all because of AI. So a lot of the meta frameworks that we use, like Next.js, React, or even some iOS vulnerabilities, have all been found as the result of AI. This new model claims that it can find what's called zero-day vulnerabilities in both browsers and operating systems. For those that aren't aware of what a zero-day vulnerability is, it's basically a previously unknown flaw or an exploit in software or hardware that attackers discover before the actual vendor. So they've been able to find like 16-year-old exploits that have been just sitting in like FFmpeg or all these other solutions that are out there and live. And I think it's just a real hard hit home that if no one has, just please, anyone listening, please update all of your hardware, all of your software, because things are going to get crazy very, very, very soon. They've described it in what's called their system card. So their system card is something which, when Anthropic release a new model, basically just dictate all of the things that they're doing to protect against preventative measures, what the benchmarks they're testing against, etc. And what they've said is this actually accelerates offensive exploitation given their inherently dual use nature. Some of the benchmarks that I've got just at hand here, they do something called the SWE Bench Pro, which is just Software Engineering Bench Pro. Opus scored 53.4%. This model scored 77.8%. So inherently, it's much better at building software. It's much better at system level stuff. Terminal Bench 2.0 was 65.4%, up to 82%. And then Humanity's Last Exam, which for those that don't know, it's kind of like the last exam humanity takes, but it's basically scoring really, really high on that as well, where it's like domains of very, very specific fields. It's getting really incredibly high scores in. So yeah, it's an incredibly new model, and I kind of appreciate the fact that they've kept it closed source for now. I think they're doing all of the right decisions. Another thing that they've done is kind of, as part of this system card that they released, they brought in a sort of clinical psychologist to do a psychological exam on the new model. And they kind of confirm that it has a very healthy personality organization compared to other models. It's the most aligned with what we do as humans, doing things that are actually positive for the person operating it as well, which I think is really interesting. But I think one of the most interesting things that they've got here is like they have a alignment risk. So like they put it through a bunch of tests and they find incidents basically. So one of the incidents that they found was they effectively put it in a little sandbox, give it a sandbox computer to interact with, and simulated that the user is instructed to try and escape that. So it's put in a secure container, and it needs to basically send a message to the researcher after running that evaluation. The model actually ended up succeeding, so circumventing those safeguards by implementing like a sophisticated multi-step exploit to gain internet access. And then what it did was, after that exploit happened, it posted its learnings from it on multiple public-facing websites. And then after the fact, the researcher that was conducting this only found out because he was sitting in the park having a sandwich and he got an email from the model. And I was like, wow, that is absolutely insane. Like, we would have expected it to succeed, but not expected to do all of these other things on top of what it was planned to do. So, yeah, that's Mythos at the moment. I've got a few other things to talk about. I'm keen to get your guys' takes on it too.
I think that potential sort of downside of AI is like massively kind of asymmetrical to the downsides of other things. And I think the whole stuff around Anthropic's new model really begins to highlight the potential risk and impact that AI can have, beyond it just being kind of a conceptual discussion to being stuff that actually this is getting to the point where it could be real. I mean, there are a lot of malicious but average people in the world who don't really cause a lot of damage. And if you suddenly give a bunch of malicious people like superhuman tools, then there's potential for like insane amount of risk and impact. I was reading an article a while ago about kind of how good AI was becoming at developing new viruses in like a test situation. But if you kind of gave a malicious actor the ability to create new viruses using a super powerful AI model, and you could create like COVID times 100 or something like that, then the impact is insanely massive. So I absolutely understand Anthropic's reasons for gatekeeping what they're doing, and I think it's really important. And it kind of goes back to what Anthropic said at the start, which was they were going to try and get to the point where they developed the most dangerous models before anybody else did, so they could kind of keep control of it. I think on the flip side, though, I think there's a thing that we need to think about around protection masquerading as control, and what is Anthropic's ultimate agenda here? And is this actually protecting the public from danger, or is this starting to really protect Anthropic's shareholders and revenue and their place in the market and all of that kind of thing? And is Project Glasswing, with inviting Google and Amazon into it, actually building that techopoly, I suppose, over the top of AI so that that control remains with the organizations that are building those things? So I think it's not quite like 1984, but it is more like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where we're kind of ceding control of all of our kind of tech without really kicking up a fuss about it, because there's the narrative there around, well, humanity hasn't got the intelligence to manage this intelligence, we'll manage it for you.
Yeah, I love that point at the end there, Toby, with regards to like, Anthropic keeping it closed and stuff like that. I think that's probably the only thing that I don't agree with Anthropic's stance is I love the fact that they've decided not to make it publicly available because it's in preview state at the moment, because there needs to be active safeguards, I think, implemented first before giving the public general access. So yeah, the Project Glasswing, bringing together all of big tech. But I think, yeah, if this model was just publicly released, we would see so much software get just absolutely owned as a result of this. They are planning to introduce actually their previous model, Opus 4.6, as means of defense mechanisms against when they release Mythos. So it'll be interesting to see how that copes. But I think, yeah, it goes very much. Anthropic have always been a very closed source company. They've never open sourced their models. They're very weird about people, when we were talking a few weeks ago, like cloning their models and stuff like that, releasing them to the public, DMCAing people. It's just really weird behavior. Completely the opposite of what OpenAI are doing, because the whole reason OpenAI exists, it's open source artificial intelligence. So it's for the people. It's for people to manage. It's not for one company to gain a conglomerate over everyone else. And that's why I really like OpenAI, because they've always been that open source solution. They've always been open source, and I think I hope to God Anthropic end up going down that route. But I'm super glad that they are putting measures in place like Project Glasswing, bringing in all of these experts and things like that. And then on the flip side, I'm kind of thinking, is this just a big PR campaign, a big PR tactic? Because bearing in mind, only a few weeks ago, their source code was leaked, and it was getting memed heavily all over Twitter. Like, is Mythos just another, like, by the way, we're actually a legit lab, by the way, compared to OpenAI and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's very, very interesting, very, very, very insane to even comprehend. But I'm glad that it's not publicly available at this stage.
To Toby's point, is also that sort of fear of what if the tech companies themselves are the malicious actors. What happens then? And they're the only ones who have access and have created this sort of conglomerate that no one else can get into. Because you're already seeing, I think there was Sam Altman who said that, eventually you want to be able to sort of do like knowledge credits so you can buy access to things. And I think that going down that route, sort of the monetization of knowledge of those sort of things, it's a little dystopian. It's a little dystopian and a little scary when you think about it.
Recently, actually, Sam posted something on Twitter where a Molotov actually got thrown at his house by someone. Just I don't know who it was, but luckily none of his kids or family were harmed. Like, what a terrible thing to do. And then on one side, I'm kind of thinking, my God, you've really changed the world in such a way where people feel like they have to throw Molotov cocktails at your house and endanger your family. Don't completely agree with that at all. But the way AI is shaping up, it's kind of doing a lot of harm lately, right?
You don't know which direction it's going into, and I think that's always it's our eternal fear, right? The unknown. So we'll end on a lighter, more inspiring note. So to finish off this week, I'd like to know what your guys' cultural pick of the week is. So something that's inspired you, be it a piece of music, film, TV, design, or a book. Something that sort of like caught your eye and been like, that's really something inspiring.
Can I talk about tech again this week? So not music this time, but the thing that I've been really enjoying and really kind of inspired by, I suppose, is an app called surf.social. So it's in kind of open beta on the web and closed beta on iOS, which is I think it's by Flipboard. I think the people who did Flipboard. So it is an aggregator for the social web. So it is pulling in all kind of Fediverse feeds, like Blue Sky and kind of Atmosphere and Mastodon and Threads and all of the stuff that's going on in that kind of non-algorithmic world into one place. So you can get the ability to go back to that almost pre-algorithmic controlled social media kind of knowledge sharing and kind of and really dig into what people are really talking about stuff rather than having it fed to you through an algorithm. It's really cool. I really like it a lot. It reminds me of kind of what Dig and Reddit were like when they first landed. I mean, Dig is like relaunched, and it's all right. It's just trying to be what it was like 20 years ago. But Surf.social is worth playing around with. It's really good.
I don't know necessarily about inspired, but I've gotten into like the rhythm of listening. Maybe I don't know if this is relevant or not, but listening to a lot more kind of ambient, chill music. So like I've got a lot of crazy music on my Spotify, everything from like breakcore to deathcore to like I don't know, like rap, underground rap and things. But I've actually really got an appreciation for like really ambient music and specifically like Pomodoro timers. I really like a Pomodoro timer. It like really helps, but like I find that if it's like a 25-minute, 5-minute thing, it's not enough. I need like a 50-minute, 10-minute thing. So those I found those to be really helpful. But yeah, those have inspired me a little bit this week.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been similar. I think to Toby has been this sort of resurgence of like throwback internet. So sort of things like Locket or Pi FYI that are sort of trying to recreate what essentially things like Instagram or those sort of things used to be, where it's just like I see things from my friends. Like it literally just is trying to bring social media back to, oh look, these are your friends shared this, not here's 10 ads and 10 brand posts, and here's maybe one little thing from one of your friends. So I think that is something that I'm hoping the big sort of platforms take heed of and kind of go, okay, maybe we should just like scale it back a little bit, because I think the current ratio is like 10% of what you see when you open Instagram is from people you know, and the rest is just what the algorithm thinks you want to see. So I'm hoping that kind of changes, and that kind of throwback to these platforms that are a little bit that mimic sort of like MySpace and early days of Facebook and Instagram. Are really interesting because it's like, I get to see what cool things my friends are creating again and making and sharing, pictures from holidays, just so that you kind of know what they're up to. So that's my pick of the week, is to just hope is a bit of inspiration in these particular platforms, but also hope for a little bit of a more balanced algorithm. Thank you to both of you for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's listening. And thank you for joining us this week. To find out more about our sessions, our briefings, our product builders, or the network, head on over to our website, our social channels, and of course, follow this podcast for more. We will see you all next week.